By 1963, the constitution had rendered the Cypriot government ineffective. The Turkish minority used its power of veto to stall legislation. President Makarios proposed amendments to eliminate the Turkish veto.
Θα έλεγα ότι οι ρίζες της διχόνοιας μεταξύ Ελλήνων και Τούρκων της Κύπρου ήσαν μέσα στο σύνταγμα μας, το οποίο περιείχε πολλά διαιρετικά στοιχεία.
The Turkish Cypriots then withdrew from the government, and once again, intercommunal violence erupted. Turkey threatened to invade Cyprus.
Και πολύ περισσότερο οφείλεται βέβαια στο γεγονός ότι η Τουρκία είχε εξ αρχής κατακτητικά σχέδια και βλέψεις και απέτρεπε τους Τουρκοκυπρίους από την συνεργασία με τους Έλληνας μέσα στα πλαίσια του συντάγματος.
The invasion was averted by President Lyndon B. Johnson.
Tension in the eastern Mediterranean and the threat of war between Greece and Turkey brought the evacuation of American, British, and UN dependents from the disputed island of Cyprus. NATO Secretary General CYPRUS and President Johnson's special envoy Cyrus also talked with Greek and Turkish leaders.
Turkey was warned that there could be consequences of using U.S.-supplied military equipment against Cyprus. (1967) Greece. A right-wing military junta, led by Greek army colonels, overthrows the democratically elected Greek government. This junta reignites the fervor for Enosis. For the next 7 years, President Makarios walks a thin line to maintain Cyprus as an independent republic. But in 1974, using extreme Greek Cypriot nationalists, the Greek junta overthrew Archbishop Makarios and attempted to assassinate him. He survived the attempt.
Εκείνη την ημέρα, στις 15 Ιουλίου, ήμουνα στο γραφείο μου 8 παρατέταρτο. Οι πρώτοι επισκέπτες μου θα ήταν μια ομάδα παιδιών από το Κάιρο, που ήρθαν στην Κύπρο ως φιλοξενούμενοι μου. Γύρω στις 8 και 20 περίπου με ειδοποίησαν ότι τα παιδιά είναι στο σαλόνι. Ο επικεφαλής της ομάδος άρχισε να με προσφωνεί από χειρογράφου. Είπε μερικά λόγια και άρχισαν οι πυροβολισμοί. Οπότε έφτασε κάποιος από την προεδρική φρουρά για να μου πει ότι τεθωρακισμένα και τάγκς ήσαν μπροστά στην είσοδο και άρχισε η επίθεση κατά του προεδρικού μεγάρου. Μερικοί φίλοι εκεί με συνεβούλευσαν να εγκαταλείψω την Κύπρο. Δεν είχα όμως μέχρι τη στιγμή εκείνη σκεφτεί ένα τέτοιο πράγμα και η πρώτη μου αντίδραση ήταν αρνητική. Δεν ήθελα να φύγω από την Κύπρο και να νομίσει ο λαός ότι τον εγκατέλειψα και έφυγα για να σώσω τη ζωή μου. Τελικά όμως, και αφού ακούστησαν πολλά επιχειρήματα, επίστηκα πως ήταν το καλύτερο να φύγω από την Κύπρο, ώστε εκτός Κύπρου ελεύθερος να μπορώ να εργαστώ εναντίον των πραξικοπηματιών.
As the United States stood by, the junta quickly replaced President Makarios with Nikos Samson, known primarily as a right-wing extremist who had allegedly killed 12 people during ethnic clashes in Nicosia. Samson believed he had restored peace and order to Cyprus. But the real storm had yet to strike.
I think the idea of some of the colonels anyway in Athens was to incorporate Cyprus into Greece. This, needless to say, had exercised the Turkish population and Turkey itself. And so that led to a lot of tension.
Five days later, on July 20th, Turkey invaded Cyprus.
Και αφού πέρασαν οι πρώτες μέρες του πραξικοπήματος και νομίζαμε ότι ανασάναμε λιγάκι, άρχισε η τουρκική εισβολή Και τότε είδαμε το νοσοκομείο να γεμίζει αμέσως από τραυματίες. Ερχόντουσαν οι τραυματίες από όλους τους δρόμους και με όλα τα μέσα. Είδαμε καμένους με βόμβες να πάρουν, με ρουκέτες. Το νοσοκομείο γέμισαν οι διαδρόμοι. Βάλαμε παντού. Επιτάξαμε τις κλινικές της Λευκωσίας και πάλι δεν υπήρχε χώρος για τους τραυματίες. Ήταν κάτι που πραγματικά δεν μπορώ να περιγράψω, δεν μπορώ να φανταστεί κανένας το τι είδαμε και τι...
I think the U.S., if it had moved, could have prevented the coup by Samson, which the junta in Athens was behind. And had they prevented that coup, Makarios would have continued as the president. And I think it would be much more problematic that Turkey would have found the pretext.
The Turkish pretext was to protect the independence of Cyprus. The London-Zurich Agreement allowed Turkey, Greece, or Great Britain to take action against any threat to this independence. The Turkish invasion clearly went much further. Titina Loizithu was living in the port city of Kyrenia when Turkish forces landed on the beachhead in 1974.
I grew up in Kyrenia. My father comes from Kyrenia, and I grew up in Kyrenia, which is on the northern part of Cyprus, in a lovely setting between the sea and the mountains.
Using arms supplied by the U.S., Turkish forces managed to overcome the stiff resistance of the tiny Cypriot National Guard in and around Kyrenia, and occupied a narrow corridor linking Kyrenia to the Turkish Cypriot enclave in Nicosia. Terrified Greek Cypriots fled south.
They drove the Greek Cypriot population from the north to the south systematically, sometimes through terror, sometimes just through pushing, sometimes through putting them on buses and driving them across to the line.
Greek Cypriots were feeling that they were being pushed out of their land in the north, which they were, because the Turks had gotten quite spirited in protecting their territory, even though the Greeks owned a good bit of it.
When I got married, I could not settle in Kyrenia, where we could have had our home built. So we settled in Nicosia in anticipation to go back to Kyrenia when the political situation would have allowed us to go back and forth to Kyrenia in a short time.
Within 3 days of the Turkish invasion, both the Greek junta in Athens and its puppet regime in Cyprus collapsed. The successor to President Makarios, Glafkos Kleridis, took office.
So, of course, when in 1974 this dictatorship collapsed, I was delighted, as all my Greek friends were. But I realized that a terrible price had been paid for this emancipation, this liberation of Greece, and the price had been paid by Cyprus. That it was only because of the mad adventure of the colonels in their attempt to overthrow Archbishop Makarios that Greece was once again free. That seems a very high price to pay.
A ceasefire mandated by the UN Security Council was arranged. From July 25th to July 31st, the UK, Greece, and Turkey met in Geneva to discuss the invasion amidst strong fears that Turkey would launch a second, more powerful offensive. Critics say the United States did little to restrain Turkey.
We needed to send a strong signal to Turkey that they couldn't just move without there being some consequences that would be associated with that as a check or an inhibition on Turkish action, because they struck in there and they moved troops in, and of course then they paused.
British Foreign Secretary James Callaghan led the Geneva peace talks, attended by U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Arthur Hartman.
It was quite clear from those meetings that there was sort of no understanding. And Callaghan talked to me about, can you Americans stop this second invasion, which it looks like it's about to take place.
on August 14th, they resumed their offensive, and that's, of course, when they occupied over a third of the island, and when you had 200,000 refugees as a consequence. That was a disaster. I mean, they were in Geneva, engaged in talks under Callahan's chairmanship, the Greeks and the Turks, and then the Turks launched this attack early in the morning. They were in late the night before, trying to work out, a peaceful resolution of the matter.
There's an eerie silence about the once thriving town. Certainly the Greek Cypriots, who make up 4/5 of its population, appear to have given up hope of keeping it out of Turkish hands. At first light, the Turkish jets bombed it, adding to the damage caused by similar attacks 3 weeks ago. They hit empty office blocks and deserted apartments. Whatever the Greek resistance may be in the face of the advancing Turks to the northwest of the city, there's none apparent in Famagusta itself.